You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and federally certified veteran-owned small business. I'm your host, Robert Bain, along with our producer, Chris Spangle. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact us at chris@leadersandlegends.net. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Our guests today, we've had some really smart people on the podcast. Mitch Daniels multiple times, Steve Goldsmith. The list goes on. I think we've beaten that standard today because the two people we're going to speak with for the next hour are phenomenal leaders, and not leaders in a way that is something that we'll forget, but leaders in a way that we'll remember for the next several decades because of the impact of their leadership and their organizations. Claire Fiddian-Green joined the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation as President and Chief Executive Officer in 2015. Fairbanks Foundation focuses on, among other things, health, education, and vitality of Indianapolis, which we will discuss. Previously, Fiddian-Green served as Special Assistant for Education Innovation to Indiana Governor Mike Pence. We were in some meetings together, one or two maybe, and co-founder of the Center for Education and Career Innovation. Claire also served as the founding executive director of the Indiana Charter School Board. Prior roles include President of the Mind Trust, Grants Officer for the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation, and Senior Analyst within Eli Lilly and Company's Corporate Finance Investment Banking Group. Fiddian-Green holds a BA in Political Science, Russian Studies,
Немного.
from Brown University, and an MBA from Columbia University. In 2024, she was awarded an honorary Doctor of Education degree from Marian University. And one of the reasons that I asked you to come on is because Dr. Ken Britt was fulminating about how wonderful the work is you're doing. Marian's fabulous. Fabulous. Since 2018, Maureen Weber has served as President and CEO of Early Learning Indiana. Early Learning Indiana is on a mission to empower children throughout Indiana with the essential knowledge and skills to thrive in kindergarten and beyond. Before helming Early Learning Indiana, and among other leadership positions, Maureen was Chief Strategy Officer for Project Lead the Way and Chief Operating Officer for the Indiana Department of Education and Chair of the Indiana Charter School Board. You guys have met.
We go back a ways.
From 2006 to 2008, she was Deputy Commissioner of Strategy and Operations for the Bureau of Motor Vehicles during the Daniels Revolution. Let's be sure to talk about that. Because I was at State Party talking about how great you guys were, because Ron Stiver was telling me how great you guys were. Maureen earned her Bachelor's of Science in Foreign Service International Relations from Georgetown University and her law degree, speaking of Mitch Daniels, from Georgetown University Law Center. You were started in Georgetown in 1993. I was at summer school in Georgetown University in 1993. The Exorcist stairs, man. You can never get enough of them.
They're pretty creepy.
Claire and Maureen have both been named a woman of influence by the Indianapolis Business Journal. I've read more of your background than probably any guest I've ever had because it's just so impressive. Not only the leadership positions, but where you are choosing to devote your energies. Thank you both for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Let's start with the vitality of Indianapolis. And I don't want to put you in a bad spot because the headlines have been so rough lately. But expand on that just a little bit And how does a vibrant pre-K system initiative work into that?
Yeah, so Vitality of Indianapolis is the one of the focus areas that the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation has always had because it was established by Mr. Fairbanks to benefit the people of Greater Indianapolis. And it's a little bit of a catch-all category because it gives the board flexibility. And where we started with grant making in that area was actually in the life sciences, since that was so critical to the economic vitality of the city of Indianapolis. It has evolved since I've been the president and CEO at the foundation. And now it's more about how can we better connect people in our community with available opportunities for employment and education so that they can thrive here and help the city be great. So that is what Vitality of Indianapolis is, as it sounds flexible, and it is. It gives the board the opportunity to make some decisions about how it would like to fund things, especially if there is a new opportunity or a challenge that's really facing Indianapolis that the Fairbanks Foundation would like to address. In terms of pre-K, we've actually done a lot of funding over the years to Early Learning Indiana in particular, which Maureen leads, because we do believe that it's really important, and all the research shows that young people need to have a great start in order to do well in school and, of course, be thriving adults, ideally living in Greater Indianapolis the rest of their lives. And so what we have funded over the years is there a way you can actually assess how kids are doing? And that was work that we did with Early Learning Indiana through grant making to them, and then also some researchers in Chicago who are experts in early childhood. So we've had a lot of fun doing that because we think it's not only fun, but very important for young people to start on strong feet as they move into kindergarten and their K-12 experience.
Maureen, if I said Vitality of Indianapolis, pre-K experience, how would you mix the two?
Yeah, I think Indianapolis's vitality and its competitiveness really starts in the very earliest years. And the initial wiring that takes place in the first handful of years of life can be fixed later on, but it costs us a lot more money and takes us more time to do that. And there's really a compelling case for getting it right the first time. And so starting in even before pre-kindergarten in the years between birth and 3 years old and all the years leading up to time in elementary school, we could make the most of, but we'd have to change our funding priorities and think about our strategy a little differently there.
As the oldest person in the room, I will say that my pre-K experience was Scooby-Doo, Janie, Cowboy Bob, the list goes on, Peggy.
Sure.
When did that change? Was there a sort of recognition, or was there always, of, hey, look, it's not, cartoons are fun and all that's good to go, Sesame Street, you can learn X, Y, and Z from the count, but we're wasting an opportunity here.
Yeah, I think the good news is it's not rocket science. This is something that probably happened for you at home and at church and in your community, but it is definitely neuroscience. And we've gotten a lot smarter about what's going on in the brain while a child is that young. And we probably ought to spend a little less time with Scooby and a little more time with caring adults in conversation with us back and forth. And it's really, at its simplest form, it makes all the sense in the world. If children know that their needs are going to be responded to in a loving manner, they're just going to feel a little braver. They get more courageous, and so they'll explore more. And that is where learning happens, is in that exploration. And over time, the way we've gone about the work has changed, but at the essence of what we do, it's about making sure that there are adults that are encouraging children to take that next step, learn that next thing, and whatever the sequence of their progression is.
Is it an inside out? This question for the both of you. Is it an inside out effort? In other words, if the parents don't buy, I always tell my clients, my PR clients, you message from the inside out. If you don't believe it, then your staff doesn't believe it. If your staff doesn't believe it, then the list goes on and on. So is it not convincing or maybe illuminating the benefits to parents? And that's where the push comes from. And then everything else hopefully snaps into place.
I think that's an important piece of it. And I'm curious for Claire's perspective. I would say it's both inside out and outside in, because while some of the benefits are certainly felt by the family itself, many of the benefits are realized later down the road by all of us, by those of us who are looking to have a competitive workforce, who want to make sure that our communities really are thriving and that all of our citizens are flourishing. And so I think the pressures can come from both directions as we think about the case for early care and education.
And I would just add that people want to take care of their children and have their children be successful. Often, especially that time in their lives, they're working really hard and they may not have the energy or the capacity to do the kind of support that is needed at home. So it definitely needs to start in the home for sure, but then it needs to include outside partners as well to ensure that every young child, regardless of their family life and their circumstance, is getting the necessary support to start off on the right foot once they enroll in kindergarten and make their way through K-12.
Would this be a matter of, because I've read articles that, and forgive me, I'm not endorsing them. I've read articles that say it's pre-K is it's just daycare. It's just spending money to feel good. I hate to say what's the science because it reminds me of my 3 COVID shots, but what's the science that says this not has to be done, but really should be done?
Yeah, I think it at the very sort of basic level, what's happening in the brain in the earliest years is your brain's deciding which things it needs to keep and which things it ought to prune away. And so if we are asking it to do a lot of work in those early years, it'll keep a lot. And that helps us all the way down the road as children are learning algebra and physics. It has its roots in those early moments. On the other hand, if we're not making the most of it, a lot of the potential of those early years gets washed away. And we have to spend a lot of remediation and time and money fighting to get it back. And it really is as fundamental as the wiring that's happening in the brain in the earliest years and our opportunity to grab all that potential that we can while it's there.
One of the things that we funded that Maureen partnered with, but it was some researchers in Chicago, University of Chicago, was developing an assessment that we've been implementing, that's been implemented in Indiana for the past few years, called the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. And there's a curriculum that goes along with that called Getting on Track. And what that does is provide early numeracy and early literacy skills for young people that helps them be well prepared when they actually enroll in K-12. And there is a lot of research around what's happening in the brain in young people to show that providing those early numeracy, early literacy skills is really critical to helping them be set up for success and not have to struggle when they start getting into their formal academic schooling situation.
Whenever I hear the word program, I think of the word pecuniary, not only because of P.E. McAllister, one of his favorites, but who's going to pay for it? Now, we're recording this in early July. We try not to date stamp the podcast because they don't get posted in order. But been a lot of coverage about cuts from the federal. The COVID funds are leaving. Maureen, you were just quoted in an article, I think in Chalkbeat, that was picked up by the IBJ. When I hear Fairbanks Foundation, I got to imagine that your phone is ringing off the hook all the time, but maybe even more so now, Claire? How is what is required fall on people like you who run philanthropic organizations?
It is definitely a challenging financial situation for almost every organization right now. And so I think everyone is having to make hard decisions about what continues and what stops and how do we better use our resources. But I think the reality of working for a funding entity is that you always get more requests than you can fund. So although there have been more conversations, it doesn't feel that different than how it normally feels for us. I'm sure for Maureen, it feels quite different.
I think the situation in Indiana around early care and education is like the situation around a lot of things right now. Obviously, it was a tough budget cycle, and there are absolutely things to celebrate. The Indiana General Assembly allocated $150 million almost to support a funding gap in child care and development fund vouchers that was caused by the end of those COVID relief dollars. And that's a level of investment we've never seen before. And I think really speaks to the progress that's been made over the last decade or two as we understand the importance of this work. It's also just about $150 million short of where we would have needed it to be to continue to fund at the levels that we've seen in the years since COVID. And it's a challenging time. And the risk is that we lose some of the supply that we've worked really hard to build through philanthropic and public investments over the last many years.
You are listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guests are Claire Fiddian-Green. She is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation, and Maureen Weber, who is the president and CEO of Early Learning Indiana. You want a softball, Claire? You ready?
Sure.
What do you admire most about the work being done by Early Learning Indiana?
I think that Maureen Weber is an extraordinary leader. I've known her for a long time, and the things that are great about her is that she is strategic. So she helps organizations focus on the right things, and then she puts the right teams in place and helps support her team in execution. Maureen has done a fabulous job leading Early Learning Indiana, and many Hoosiers are better off because of her leadership. But I think Early Learning Indiana, they work with actually operating early learning centers in Marion County, and then they do consulting work with centers around the state. And so I think what Maureen really does and what Early Learning Indiana does is they understand the research, they understand what are best practices, and they're in the position to provide counsel and support to entities around the state and make sure that their own centers are operating with high quality and ensuring that young people are getting set up for success through the work that they do.
Maureen, what do you admire most about the work being done by the Fairbanks Foundation?
Well,
And Claire?
That's an incredibly long list, and it definitely starts with Claire's leadership. And she also, I think, has built just a tremendously capable team. And one thing that we've noticed about our work with them over the years is that they come alongside us, I don't think intentionally, but just because they are so well informed and capable, almost in a consultancy vibe. They want to deeply understand the root of the challenges that we're trying to solve and really think alongside us about how we get to the other side of them. I think the other thing that Fairbanks is really continuing to set the example with respect to is taking the long view. And we're in a time where no one thinks much past tomorrow. And the Fairbanks has made these bets with our future in mind, and the work that they've done in recent years around apprenticeships, as I'm sure we'll talk about, is just one of many examples of what the tenacity that Claire has brought to the organization has brought about for the community in which we live. And it's hard to overstate the impact now and well into the future.
Several years ago, I had a client, an education client, wasn't based in Indianapolis or Indiana, it was based in Florida, Charter Schools USA. And one of the things that Jonathan Hage, who was when I first met him through Todd Houston, because they were taking over Howe, which is where I graduated. But one of the things he told me in my initial sit down was, you all in Indiana don't realize how much the rest of the country looks at Indiana. A, is that still true, Claire? And B, and you're next, Maureen. And B, is it in danger of not remaining true?
So yes, it is still true. In fact, there was just an article in the Washington Post yesterday that Indiana is leading the country around youth apprenticeship efforts, which many states are interested in or have been working on for quite some time. And that's only one area in education where I think Indiana is in the lead. And I think this goes back for many years through successive gubernatorial administrations, of course, and of course, the Indiana General Assembly is a key partner, but also the many incredible organizations like Early Learning Indiana, like our post-secondary institutions, and like organizations like the Mind Trust that are doing work to try to improve the conditions to ensure that there are long-term systemic changes that are going to ensure that we have high-quality education, starting in early childhood, continuing in K-12, and then on to post-secondary education and workforce development. So yes, I do think we need to get over the Hoosier humility and say there's a lot of wonderful things that have happened and are happening in Indiana through the leadership and efforts of many entities in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors.
Maureen?
Yeah, I agree with that entirely, and think the opportunity ahead is to make sure that we are continuing to think in terms of creating the conditions for change and not resting on our laurels with more programmatic solutions. I think the focus in recent years around the science of reading, it's happening in Indiana, it's happening in many other places as well, has been really necessary and appropriate at the same time. And I worked for Project Lead the Way in STEM education as well. I think we need to do probably a parallel effort to get back to basics with early numeracy as well, and make sure that we don't put all of our eggs in the literacy basket to the disadvantage of really making sure that people become the critical thinkers we need them to be. One cannot be separated from the other, but we have to focus on both.
Do you believe in the I'm a numbers guy as opposed to I'm a writing guy or gal. You hear people say that. Women say, hey, I can't do math isn't my thing, but I can do all this other cool stuff. Or guys say, hey, math's not my thing, but I can. Is that an accurate sort of self-characterization?
I believe deeply we need to be all of those things. And really fundamentally, we need to be critical thinkers. And if we're critical thinkers, then we can figure a lot out along the way. And I think we really don't understand what the disruption that AI is going to bring to our work looks like. There are lots of theories and people writing about it. But I think what we can take to the bank is that the more that we have critical thinkers and problem solvers who are agile thinkers who can adapt, the better off we'll be. So I hope nobody self-selects out. And we know that it happens for very young children, girls especially, really early on. And so part of our job is to make sure that all doors remain open.
As someone who took finite math 3 times but loves to write speeches, I can just say that I think it's one of those things maybe where people pigeonhole themselves. Is that true, Claire?
I think that's true. And that's why the work of an organization like Early Learning Indiana, where you're laying the foundation for every child, regardless of their family circumstances, including income, with early numeracy and early literacy skills is so critical because we do need agile learners because of AI. And there's actually that relates a lot to the apprenticeship work that the Fairbanks Foundation is funding. You need to have agile learners at every age, all the way through retirement, who can adapt to the changes that are just part of being in the world. AI is making those changes happen a lot faster, but change has always been a part of being alive. And so we need to make sure that you're not just getting one set of skills. You have to have both sets of skills so that you can be your optimal self when you're going to work and functioning in our society.
One
So
of the
take finite again, I think is what we...
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see, WWB plus. I got lucky the last time. One of the most unexpected yet fun podcasts I ever did, and we've posted, I think 320 at this point, Chris, close to it, was with Bart Peterson. Now, obviously, I worked for Mayor Ballard, as did Mr. Maureen Weber. We worked together. Nick is wonderful. And we all love Mayor Ballard, which made me wonder if Mayor Peterson would come on. He did. And I said, look, I'm not going to dwell on 2007, but he said he'd talk about it. And he said he ran for a 3rd term to protect charter schools. That's a direct quote, as I recall. And obviously, Mayor Ballard continued those after he won. How important is it for education, for the work you do, for raising money, all the important things, the vitality of Indianapolis, to have this bipartisan approach? Because there really aren't that many issues where the Venn diagram is pretty fat in the middle, but this sort of improving education and its offshoots is one of them. Claire?
I think that everyone can agree that we need to give multiple options to learners at every age, because there are also different types of learners. There are some that are more theoretical, some that are more practical. People thrive in different environments, and that includes learning environments. And as somebody who used to be a charter school authorizer, and through the work of the Fairbanks Foundation, we have funded efforts to support charter school implementation. It's clear that multiple options need to be available to serve people in our community here in Greater Indianapolis and across the state, and of course, across the country. So I think that regardless of political viewpoints, et cetera, everyone can agree that everyone approaches things differently and learns differently, and we need to ensure that there are maximum learning opportunities for everyone in our community.
One.
Yeah, I was had the privilege of being the founding chair of the Purdue Polytechnic High School Network, and we founded those schools really because Purdue was having this challenge of not being able to find the diversity of students that they were looking for that could be successful on their West Lafayette campus. And I think there's something very unifying in what Claire said, and in figuring out what it is that can help all children succeed, and it is going to look really different for everyone. It's sometimes hard to do the level of experimentation that we've done at Purdue Poly in a large system, because for lots of good reasons, right? There are procedures and processes that develop over time. And so having these more nimble organizations that can help us experiment and try new things, I think have been really important to our way forward. And I'm thrilled that the kind of bipartisan support that we've seen remains.
It's enlightening as a kid growing up in Irvington, right? You had Catholic and you had IPS, right? Now you have so many options. And not only do you have so many options, which long overdue, and thank God they still exist, but I'm going to say in the trenches, grassroots leaders, Scott Bess,
Sure.
Tommy Reddick, 100 names, Rama Shahid, going on and on. How important is it to have, and I know it's important, but how much impact can a vital and neighborhood focused school leader bring? And I need to mention Victory College Prep because they're killing it. In my old school, I went to 111 and they're in the 111. And if you drive through some of these neighborhoods, sometimes you go, these kids don't have a chance. But because of school choice, maybe they had one they never had before. Claire?
As the parent of two children who are still making their way through the education process, it's incredibly important to have a high quality school that you feel comfortable with as a parent and that you're in which your children are succeeding. And so having options like Victory College Prep and Purdue Polytechnic High School is incredibly important because we want to make sure, again, regardless of the circumstances of somebody's family life, that they are availing themselves of the best learning environment for them in which they're going to flourish and succeed. So, of course, especially with many of the charter schools in the Indianapolis area, many of them have been, of course, startups. So you need to have a fantastic leader who has got a strong vision, knows how to build a team, and knows how to implement. So, yes, I think that is very important to have a high quality leader and, of course, high quality schools in every neighborhood across the Indy area.
I agree completely. And on the flip side, I think we have to be willing to let those models that aren't proving out the point go off to pasture as well. And the charter environment gives us a little more flexibility to do that.
You have read my mind. I've done the PR for 2 charter school closings. It's no day at the beach. But would we be lying to ourselves as a movement if we didn't close those schools? Accountability is at the heart of the school, charter school, whatever we want to call it, school reform movement. And if you don't have that, then all you are doing is just swapping the names, but keeping the same. As educators or people involved in education, how does it feel when you say that school just didn't make it?
So as somebody who launched a new charter school authorizing entity for the state of Indiana, that was one of the most important things that we focused on during the startup period. Of course, I talked to folks around the country that had done a wonderful job opening up charter schools and then overseeing them to ensure that they were doing a great job. And having an accountability structure was just critical to ensure that you're helping the launches get off to a successful start, but then you are having the tough conversations about, are they actually performing the way that they need to perform so that the kids that are attending those schools are doing well and thriving. They're being set up for success. So that is a key fundamental tenet of high quality charter school authorizing is you actually have to be willing to close schools when they are not meeting expectations. Now that can be for a combination of financial sometimes as well as academic reasons. But you have to look at all of that because you need to ensure that there is a strong, financially secure, high-performing school that's operating. If that's not happening, then they should be shut down.
Far beyond charter schools, we get stuck in ruts and we stay involved in programs of all types for long past our understanding of whether they're achieving the results that we would hope. And so I said to a group recently and say to our team all the time, our challenge is to stay focused on the problem we're trying to solve and not fall in love with any particular solution to it. And it's really easy to say, very hard to do. You've got time invested, you've got people invested. But I think the walk away is a really underrated strategy.
Just closing the school and just moving on and say, we got to come up. It didn't work.
Moving on from a school, from a program, from an initiative that we've tried, you have to be willing to experiment and to try new things. And you have to do some pruning. You have to let things go when they're no longer meeting the mark, or maybe they never did. It applies in charters. It applies in our work and across the board. And I think we have to be brave enough to make room for something new.
And Claire, I'm going to guess you hadn't batted 1,000 and all the stuff you funded. Pretty close, but maybe not 1,000. Is that tough to go back to funders or donors or whoever and go, look, we put our best faith in a reasonable investment and this one just didn't work out?
I am a data nerd. I love data and I always look at data. And everything that I have done in my career really has been focused on what is the data telling us, what's happening. That applies to making hard decisions about, maybe closing a low performing school as well as a program. You have to be honest with yourself. And the way to do that is through high quality data collection and analysis to say what's actually happening. Is this a good use of resources, whether that's a foundation resources or public or private resources? That is something that everyone should be doing on a regular basis to try to make the best optimal use of the limited resources we all have.
You are listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today, Claire Fiddian-Green, President and CEO of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. Maureen Weber, President and CEO of Early Learning Indiana. Now, you both say that you occasionally listen to the podcast. We want to be humble here.
I haven't heard all 300.
Is there a particular Hoosier leader and or legend you admire most, Claire?
There are many that I admire. If I was going to choose, I would mention somebody that you mentioned, who is Mitch Daniels. I had the honor of working in his administration. And then I also worked at the Mitch Daniels Leadership Foundation as the chair there. And I just think he is an extraordinary leader and human being who throws his heart and mind and full set of energy and ideas into everything he works on. And he always produces amazing results because of that. So I feel very lucky that I have had a brief exposure to him during my career. And he is one of the top leaders in Indiana for sure.
Warren?
Yeah, I definitely echo that one. And I have the honor to serve on the Mitch Daniels Leadership Foundation board currently. And it's amazing to just see that legacy continue and the amount of energy that he still devotes to making sure that the next generation is prepared and has a wide aperture for the challenges that we face. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that. And the other one we've also already talked about is Steve Goldsmith. And I worked in the bowels of the Goldsmith administration as a very young 20-something. And besides meeting my husband there, which was a good takeaway, I remember Mayor Goldsmith just coming down on a typical rounding exercise and talking to us. I was at that time running the community development block grant program for the city. And I was all of 22, 23. I knew very little. And the just depth of understanding that he had about every single person's work all around the table was astounding to me. And I've tried always to carry that same care with me as I've led teams. He's another one that I think the innovation that he brought and continues to bring is just an asset to us all.
A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Jim Bopp, whom we all know. His most admired Hoosier leader or legend was Mitch Daniels. I then emailed Mitch Daniels and said, I'm about to retire you. As an answer, you and Jim Morris get the answer 90% of the time. It's amazing what one person can do. And when Steve Goldsmith was in the studio, I've said you have a reputation of being particularly intelligent, which is obviously true. Who do you think's the most intelligent person? And he said Richard Lugar. It's no coincidence that the three people mentioned most in this podcast for that particular question are Richard Lugar, Mitch Daniels, and Jim Morris. It's been amazing to have worked with them at the time in the 70s. It's no surprise how Indianapolis has come through the way it has. So much of the discussion lately about jobs has centered on, quote, Americans don't want to do those jobs. Claire, this is your time right now to kick the living hell out of that statement. Your workforce initiatives are famous around the country, real results, a model for other states. Please take a few minutes, Maureen mentioned it as well, about your workforce initiative and why now's the time.
Yes. So I mentioned that I'm a data nerd, so I'm going to start with some data. If you look at the percentage of Hoosiers that over the age of 25 who have a 2 or a 4-year college degree, it's less than 40%. But for more than 25 years, the mantra has been everyone needs to go to college. And the reality is that not everybody does. And also that not every job requires somebody to have a college degree. So really starting almost a decade ago, the Fairbanks Foundation started funding helping Hoosiers from business, from education, from government, the nonprofit sector learn about the global gold standard for preparing young people and adults for careers meeting the needs of employers and the economy, and that is Switzerland. They have what's called the vocational and professional education and training system. More than 70% of their high school students go into an apprenticeship when they're in high school, starting in the 10th grade. And they also have reskilling and upskilling for adults as well. And very key about their system is they, starting in the 70s, intentionally built a connection to university so that you can change your career path, change your education path as your interests evolve and as the economy evolves. So, as I mentioned, we have been funding learning about that system. Starting in 2019, we started funding a planning year. And then at the end of 2019, we awarded our first grant to actually do a pilot program in Indianapolis and then a statewide community of practice. Unfortunately, that work launched in March of 2020, which you may remember was when a global pandemic was declared. So that definitely was a hamper on the implementation. Nonetheless, we had incredible uptake from a variety of employers and educators and students around Indy and actually around the state because there were other pilot programs. As we got past the pandemic and we were able to return to Switzerland and really go visit that system again to see how do they actually operate at scale, where 70% of high school students are doing an apprenticeship with every single sector of the economy, that was when we realized we needed to go from pilot programs to thinking about how do you design and implement a system at scale, and how do we make sure that we are not somehow setting kids down a dead-end path. You got to make sure that you're providing multiple options, as we've been talking about in this conversation today, because everyone is a different type of learner. And the economy is constantly evolving, especially with the impact of automation and AI. And we are now funding we've come up with a name, the Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway. And our goal is that we have 50,000 Hoosiers that have participated in an in-cap program in the next decade. And we want to cover the entire economy, every industry. And really, it is a new way for people to be educated and trained. That's a complement to the existing high school to college pathway. The goal is that we have almost 100% of young people that are well prepared and educated for the career of their choice so that they're set up for success and that employers and our economy are having their needs met. You could literally talk to me for days about this and I can talk back to you. I'm totally passionate about it. And I am really amazed by all the people that have come along for the ride. We have more than 300 Hoosier business, education, government, and nonprofit leaders around the state that have been part of this effort for the past couple of years. My co-chair is David Becker, who's the chairman and CEO of First Internet Bank. And we've got many amazing people that are at the table helping us try to figure out how do we actually lead the way in our country in creating a new pathway that's a complement to the existing and very important high school to college pathway, but is adding a new way for people to be educated and trained for great careers.
Because there are some of us who can't change a plug, right? I couldn't do anything. I cannot do anything from a technical standpoint. Maybe my intelligence is in a different area, perhaps. But then there's tons of people who can build you a car in a week, but maybe don't get into Dostoevsky, right? So there has been this either or with maybe perhaps a bit of a stigma towards the blue collar path, perhaps. Am I overstating it, Claire?
No, as I mentioned earlier, I think there has been for more than 25 years, really, like everyone needs to go to college. And I think that the data has borne out that's actually not what is happening and it's not actually what's needed. We think there are multiple different types of learners. And I think very importantly, the word apprentice has a meaning that's different in Switzerland than it does here. And so we intentionally use the word Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway to indicate that it's not just a program, but it's actually a pathway that includes practical learning as well as theoretical learning. So it's actually not just necessarily for technical careers. You can learn to be a nurse, you can learn to be an engineer, you can learn to be a banker through an Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway program.
Maureen, you mentioned a few minutes ago, warming my heart, of course, that you grew up or at least lived on the east side of Indianapolis. It is so much different than when I grew up in the 70s and 80s for some small reasons, but for a huge reason, which I think meshes with what Claire was just saying. There were probably 10 friends of mine with whom like I graduated, through high school, whose parents had a college degree out of there's probably 2,000 people at Howell at the end. Ryerson Steel, Ford, International Harvester, Naval Avionics, Chrysler, Western Electric, Paper Art. They're all gone. All those jobs were all my friends, their parents worked. How do we replace those jobs, dovetailing with what Claire's passion is?
Yeah, I don't know if I fully know the answer to that, but I think that focusing on the skills that will enable people to be ready for whatever the next job is, whatever takes the place of naval avionics and paper art, is critically important. And in our work, we have the opposite problem. We have jobs that go unfilled because compensation levels are not in a place that is competitive. And our work has predated some of this effort, but also supported by the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation to really say, okay, of the people that we have that need to be skilled differently, so maybe these are some of your parents' friends on the east side of Indianapolis. How do we prepare them for what's next as efficiently and thoroughly as possible? So we've adopted a very job-embedded, competency-based approach so that somebody who came to the table with one set of skills could participate in our program and be ready for something else. And so I think we're going to have to think about solutions like that enable the workforce that we have, whatever that looks like going forward, to move across careers and for parts of our community like the east side of Indianapolis to continue to flourish.
And how much of what is changing through the generations, right, is passed down from one to the other in terms of vocation? My dad worked at Allison when I graduated from high school. I'm going to work at Allison. In this case, let's talk about Ford or Chrysler, where the plants are gone.
Sure.
International Harvester, that is just gone. How do you get them to change their mindset to say, look, you may want to think about this job, not only because of international competition, but also because of AI?
I do think we need to fundamentally rethink career exploration. It happens far too late in high school. And it's really, as I mentioned, there's really been this, you should consider applying to college. And that's mostly what is provided to young people in high school far too late. So I think what we need to be doing is having labor market aligned career advising that starts in middle school. That includes not only students, but their parents and other family members to help them be aware of what are the actual careers available today, because not everyone knows what are the new careers. What does it actually look like to work, for example, in manufacturing? Those jobs look very different than they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that's just an example. And so we need to make sure we are better informing young people and, of course, their parents and family members and teachers so that a young person can make the right choice about, do I actually want to apply to attend a 4-year college or university, or do I want to go into an in-cap high school apprenticeship program? What are my options? What are the best options for me and the type of learner that I am that's going to lead me to a good result? So I think that's something that's also part of the work we're doing through in-cap, is trying to figure out how do we change career advising so that you're giving multiple sets of information and options to young people at the right age so they can be thinking about what's next for them in high school and beyond.
May I ask the question from the opposite side for both of you? We'll start with you, Maureen. Is it reasonable and or beneficial for us as adults to expect an 18-year-old kid to know what he or she wants to do for the rest of their lives?
That's a good question because I have an 18-year-old right now, and he definitely thinks it's unreasonable.
I'll give you a quick example. My son, when he was 18, graduated from high school, I said, what are you thinking about college?
Yeah.
And it never even entered his mind. Never. And I'm like, you don't have to study chemistry and Shakespeare. You can do other things. Now, he ended up joining the military and did 2 tours in Afghanistan. So he more than contributed.
More than.
But he just dismissed it out of hand. And part of me, instead of being upset with him, get your act together, was like, maybe he just doesn't know what he wants to do. I hate to say nerds like us, but nerds like us, we were going to go to college and we were hopefully going to work in politics or government and do what we're doing now. So,
Yeah, I have a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service, and that has not played into my career here at Early Learning Indiana. So I think even those of us nerds who maybe knew a few things didn't have it all figured out. And so I do think, and Claire will have a finely tuned perspective on this. I think back to my days at Project Lead the Way, and we spent an awful lot of time figuring out how to embed career learning into our programs. For a while, I was the interim chief program officer responsible for figuring out what is it that we need to be teaching. And we can do a much better job of showing the range of options that are available and helping people understand the world. So often children pick the things that they've seen, right? They want to be a fireman, they want to be a doctor, these are people they interact with in the world, and they never interact with advanced manufacturing. So there's a lot of value in giving them an opportunity to see that up close. I also think none of that matters if we don't get that foundation set right, because your son, my son, who knows what they're going to encounter. And the more that we can equip them for the range of things that could be coming at them in the future, I think the better off they'll be.
points well taken, because my son and I binge watch Law and Order, and he just finished his second year at McKinney Law School. Claire.
Congratulations.
So I will go back to what I was saying about labor market aligned career advising. That's got to be where we start, so that young people can see what are my opportunities. And then the big thing about the Swiss system that we are working to replicate with INCAP, the Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway, is that these are not narrow training programs. They are broad occupations. And what that means is if you go into a banking apprenticeship, if you go into advanced manufacturing apprenticeship, you're learning not just about a specific thing that you do, a task, but you're learning about the industry. You're learning, of course, about that company, and you do rotations through the company so that you get broad exposure to how do they actually function, what is the product that they produce. That's an example, again, just manufacturing. And there's multiple other industries in which we're going to be building out these new INCAP programs. And the reason that's important to your question is that gives you maximum flexibility to then say, what do I actually want to do? And also that gives the employer flexibility as the world of work changes and they need to be hiring for different types of positions. If somebody has a broad education, then they can be more adaptable and they can then go to work in the kind of new career opportunities that are going to be available. We can't even imagine what is going to be available through AI. And actually, I led a delegation from Indiana to Switzerland to meet with advanced manufacturing companies, and AI was a hot topic. Of course, around the globe, everyone's thinking, what does it mean for my company, my own job? And what they were saying, the Swiss employers who hosted us, was that actually they believe having these apprenticeship programs is key because you're getting the real time, how is this actually changing work happening today? And because you're getting this broad education, you're then going to be more likely to adapt to what does it actually look like to work in a manufacturing company, at a bank, at a construction company, you name it. So I think having that combination of the practical on-the-job training plus the theoretical learning, that's not narrow, that's broad, is going to give you the competencies that you need to be able to adapt and be flexible, which we're all going to have to continue to be as AI impacts all of us.
I'm glad we're Gen Xers, just all of us, so that we, for better or worse, may not have to deal with the overwhelming impact of AI.
Yeah.
I have one more question before we get to the 5 questions, but Maureen, I read more than once on your website about the marketplace.
Yeah.
This initiative through Early Learning Indiana. Tell me about it, because those of us who are market type people think it's basically the cure for everything, even though it isn't. But in this case, it's dispositive.
Yeah, there's this lack of information between parents of young children and early learning providers because the early learning community is very fragmented. We were talking about the charter schools earlier. We have more than 4,500 licensed early learning providers across the state of Indiana. And so for a parent to find that one open spot for their 2-year-old or their 4-year-old was and remains an incredible challenge, especially given that we know we have about 2/3 of the supply that we need all across the state. And so with support from Lilly Endowment, we launched the Early Learning Marketplace, which is a way for, we hope, everyone to get out of the middle and for demand and supply to find each other a little more organically and have real-time information about availability, which is solving a problem that has existed since the dawn of time as families searched for early care and education.
Just go to your website and
yeah, absolutely. You can find us on our website and search for real-time information about available care.
Where would this state, of course, where would this city be without the Lilly Endowment?
It's hard to imagine.
It is hard to
I'll
imagine.
speak only for early care and education. In the past handful of years, they supported $60 million early years initiative for our organization that helped to provide competitive grants all across the state to focus on the years between birth and 3 years old. But at the same time, they funded community foundations who were building supply and supporting early care and education in their backyards. They supported colleges and universities who were partnering with their local communities. The examples just in this one sector make the mind reel, and multiply that by the magnitude of work that they do. We're just almost unspeakably fortunate to have them here.
And I would just add, they are an incredible organization. Not only do they fund in Indiana, but they fund across the country. And the work that they do has enormous impact everywhere. And of course, we are Hoosiers, so we care about what happens here. And they fund in literally every sector, education, community development, and they fund incredibly important things. So we are, yes, I agree more. We are incredibly lucky to have the Lilly Endowment in Indiana.
Not to end this particular part of the podcast on a down note, but we're talking about education. The past, the present, the future. It would be remiss. We've all kind of actually have mentioned the term COVID. Claire, how much damage did it do and how do we repair it? Maureen, you get the same question next.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we're still seeing the impact, and we will for a number of years, of what the global pandemic did in terms of learning outcomes, not only because people might have been dealing with tragedy in their own lives with the loss of a loved one or themselves being ill, but they were out of the classroom and not getting the exposure to education that they needed. And unfortunately, we're seeing that in the test results here in Indiana nationally, that kids are still working to catch up. I'm never shy about leaning into challenges. I think what that means is we have to be doing much more of what Early Learning Indiana is doing in providing high quality, top-notch pre-K and early learning to make sure that the young kids can be prepared, and then the ones that were the most impacted, giving them the additional support that they need. I do think that Indiana, to your earlier question about being a leader, we have been a leader in that regard with some of the tutoring initiatives and other things that the state has been funding and others have been funding. That we can't stop. We've got to keep doing that. And I'm also hopeful that the new Indiana Career Apprenticeship Pathway can be an option for kids that might still be struggling in high school, but it gives them a new way to get educated and trained that might not only prepare them for a great career, but also prepare them to go on to college if that's what they want to do.
I can't improve on Claire there. I think that's all exactly right. And from focusing on the earliest years and making sure that we have options that are available for children who miss something along the way in those years.
We have reached the point on the podcast where we ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. We will answer them in alphabetical order. So Claire goes first. So Maureen, that gives you a little more time to ponder yours. Also, I have a bonus question for you. It's a true or false. Part of our research here at the podcast. Claire, what was your first job?
I actually worked cleaning out a stable. So I did mucking stalls and sweeping up the barn.
So politics just wasn't that big of a leap for you then. Maureen?
Like many, I babysat. And then when I was 14 years old, I started working for the mausoleum company that my mom worked at in a very smoke-filled accounting department. So I think that dates me. I'll have those gems with me for a long time.
Claire, what was your first concert?
My first concert was Billy Idol.
Rebel Yell Tour?
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the most underrated albums of the 80s. It's so
I was
good.
a big Billy Idol fan. That's going back a number of decades.
Maureen?
Mid-'80s, I saw Bruce Springsteen at Market Square.
Oh, for the Born in the USA tour?
Yeah, exactly.
Number 3, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, Claire, which book would you recommend?
I'm going to have to come back to you on that one.
For nerds, this is a bitch of a question. For sure. Go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, I pick one that's, I think, not terribly popular, but I love a book called Celia Garth. It was written in the 1950s. It's a novel. You'll have to go probably to your Half Price Books to find it, but it was set during the Revolutionary War. And Celia had this concern that everyone around her had become Tories. They'd all given up, and there were no patriots left in Charleston where she was living. And over the course of time throughout the book, she started to look for little signs of resistance and rebellion, and she joined that sort of force. And I think we're in this moment right now where it feels like maybe the extremes are winning in a lot of regards. And for those of us who are in that sort of exhausted middle, I think we would all do well to follow Celia's path a little bit and look for those signs of individuals who are worried about the rule of law, helping humanity, thinking about the importance of institutions, and maybe a bunch of those little efforts will add up as they did then.
Okay, I'm ready now. And it goes back to a leader who inspired me, Mitch Daniels. I have read, I think, all of his books, and the one that I really like a lot is Aiming Higher, Words That Change the State. So that is one that I would recommend, again, because he had such an enormous impact on not only our state, but so many people, and helping inspire their careers and the things that they have done and are doing, Maureen and others, to continue to make Indiana the best place that it can be. That is one I would highly recommend.
I bet you'll love his next book, which he's working on currently.
I look forward to reading it. I think it's going to be long.
Claire, number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
Probably the bringing down of the wall.
That would have been phenomenal.
Yep.
The spontaneous nature of it as much as anything.
And in fact, I have it somewhere in my house. My father had a business trip in Europe and came back with supposedly a little piece from the wall that I still have.
It's right next to a moon rock.
Yeah, and what does I say? A thorn from the crown of thorns that all of us Catholics see in every church across the world. Maureen?
I think it would be Lincoln's Cooper Union speech. There's something beautiful about the second inaugural for sure, but he only had a handful of days left at that point. I think seeing a leader when they are growing into the person that they're going to be would be tremendous. And so that's where I'd aim.
Last one. Claire, if you could have dinner with anyone living today, not Mitch Daniels, damn it. Anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose?
You're going to have to come back to me on this one, too. I was not prepared for this question. Sorry.
I'll buy time.
Thank you.
For me, and it's a really dorky answer, but Yuval Levin.
Brilliant writer.
Great writer, great thinker, but he's also super pragmatic, and he's trying to come up with solutions that might actually work in our time. And so I'd love to talk with him about that.
Yeah, he's a first-rate thinker, to say the least. Although I'm surprised you didn't mention Cecina legend Tony Phelps.
I think I could have dinner with him anytime.
I think you could take him to the steer in.
That's right. That's right.
At Emerson. Claire?
So because my passion is apprenticeship, I probably would want to talk with the president of Switzerland about what is happening right now and how they are adapting to all the things we've just been talking about, AI, et cetera, to make sure that they continue to have a top-notch system that we can emulate and replicate here in Indiana.
True or false, Maureen, you're a first-class baker.
That is true. It's up to my fans to decide. But
and I'll let you ruminate about who gave me that little nugget of information.
I never had a cookie or a cupcake from you.
I meant to do this earlier, and we're going to end the podcast here in just a minute. But I had it in my notes, and I just glossed over it. I could ask Claire a question, Maureen, what would you ask her? Claire, if you could ask Maureen a question, what would you ask her? I know you guys are getting ready to have dinner. You've known each other for years. There's all kinds of talk. I hate to say phenomenal leaders because it seems so cliche, but when I told people you two were coming on the podcast, you know what the reply I got more than anything else? Ooh.
I'm making us blush.
Completely. There are so many things I admire about Claire and the way she solves problems. I wonder, as I think about the other problems that are ahead for each of us, what are the things that most keep you up at night?
From a very practical standpoint, I'm always concerned about my children, that they're going to complete their education and find a career and a pathway that works for them. So that's the personal, of course. And then I feel that way broadly for all of our children. And that's why I'm really passionate about the work that the Fairbanks Foundation has done, is doing in early learning with the NCAP pathway. We also have a college enrollment initiative we're funding. We have to make sure that all of our children are well prepared to lead the lives that they want to lead.
Ask her where she's going next.
I was going to say, you just announced in a very public way that you are leaving Early Learning Indiana. And I know you don't have anything lined up yet, because I know you want to help ensure that there's a good search process for your successor, but then that gives you the time to figure out. If you could wave a magic wand and land someplace, what's the thing that you would most like to do next?
Yeah, I really am interested. Thank you for that, Claire. I was hoping, and way to go, Robert. Instead
No,
of
Tony Phelps Tony said I couldn't ask that question. He didn't say that Claire couldn't ask that question.
First and foremost, I will say I feel just incredibly fortunate to have spent the time that I have spent over the last 7.5 years leading Early Learning Indiana. And the time was right, which I think makes sense to not a lot of people. But from the rhythms of our organization and just the readiness of our team, it get to a place where you have the confidence that they can continue on without you. Of course, they'll always continue on without, but some days you feel better about that than others. And we have a team right now that's very ready for that. I think the road ahead for me, who knows, we'll see. But I worry very much about the state of the world that we're in. And I wonder what contribution that someone who has seen a lot of different things and acquired some wisdom along the way might make to that.
You have been. Go ahead, Claire.
I was going to say the one leader I did not mention who I admire greatly is my predecessor, who is no longer with us. His name is Leonard Betley, and he was the CEO and chairman of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. And he always said the graveyard is filled with irreplaceable people.
So true.
Charles de Gaulle. You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise and federally certified veteran-owned small business. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity Pershing Edwin McAllister. The best. Our guest today, Claire Fiddian-Green. She is the president and chief executive officer of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. And Maureen Weber, who went to law school, according to her husband, because she was smarter than her husband. That's a true quote.
But he knows more than I do.
He's a history nerd. Thank you, Nick, for any help you gave in convincing your wife to come on this podcast. Maureen Weber has served as president and CEO of Early Learning Indiana since 2018. You're beautiful humans, you're brilliant humans, and you're so generous to come on the podcast. And I hope your work, I know it's going to continue to make a difference, but I hope it also continues to receive the recognition and the support they deserve. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.